68, because originally I was planning on doing Andrew's episode like yesterday. I was releasing it and I was working on it, and I said, I think there was just a lot of internet interruptions, more so than I remembered anyway. So there was just this odd little blip. So I go to Andrew very nicely. Andrew, could you please come back? Sorry to bother you again. And then he was like, yes, I'll come back because I'm polite and Canadian and shit. So how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I got no complaints. Got no complaints.
No. I see you got a Young Buck shirt on.
Yeah, I do have my Young Bucks shirt on, and no complaints. Went out today, and it's just a good day.
Mm-hmm. No, man. So yesterday I didn't do as much work as I wanted to because I actually watched the AEW pay-per-view last night. That was a good show. I don't know. Did you see it?
I did not. I am right now taking a break from wrestling because I'm just like all wrestled out. And I'm taking like a 3-month hiatus because all throughout 2020, I was watching about 12 hours of wrestling every single week. And so, like, I need just to take a vacation from it collectively because if I don't, it's like it loses its meaning, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it totally does. I quit watching WWE. I'm sorry, the show just hurt. It hurt. There was a point, and here's the thing. Last year, I loved the idea of Drew McIntyre becoming champion. That was great. I thought that was an awesome choice. What they did afterwards, now some of that isn't their fault because the world went crazy. The world is still crazy. But I just felt like my IQ was dropping eventually watching WWE. So I just, you know what? I got more. Life is too short not to have some joy in it. And also, I had alternatives. I could watch New Japan and I could watch AEW. So that's what I did.
See, I'm the opposite where I don't watch WWE. I don't watch AEW. I'm watching companies like Beyond Wrestling and GCW because those companies, to me, I think are putting on better shows than WWE and AEW. And you look at all of these people who come into AEW, John Silver, Alex Reynolds, Chris Stratolander, all came through the indies and came through Beyond. You look at Orange Cassidy. Orange Cassidy was the IWTV champion, and he had all these amazing feuds, and he had a great run. And I'm saying to myself, like, the stars of the future are right now in the top indie promotions that you can get access to for $100 a year. And why would I want to watch them when they are superstars? I want to watch their journey of them becoming superstars. And also watch it whenever I want to. And it's wonderful and it's amazing. And look at GCW and Beyond. I mean, that's better than WWE and AEW in a lot of ways.
I like GCW. It's not an every day week thing for me. It's a once a month thing for me. It's the style is just
it's expensive.
It's always
it also gets expensive.
Yeah. So they have a very niche, like GCW. Orange Cassidy, I love his indie stuff, especially some of my he is probably the best comedy wrestler I've ever seen.
He's definitely up there with it. The only other one I think is Kitaro, who's a Japanese comedy wrestler who is one of the sort of original comedy wrestlers out there and set the stage. But Orange Cassidy is so good at what Orange Cassidy does. And I just think AEW is leaving money on the table with him. I really think they are.
I think AEW. I think he's in an interesting place in AEW right now, in that he shouldn't be the top guy right now, but he shouldn't be on the bottom. But they have no. He needs to do something a little different. My favorite stuff with him in AEW was with Pac. Pac's just great. Don't get me wrong. That's part of the reason why Pac's amazing. But it's also the fact that Pac gave Cassidy the range to be both comedic and serious in the same match. And looking at what they're doing with Cassidy right this minute, I would rather him. I would be interested in seeing him going against Malachi Black because I just love the idea of the comedy meeting horror. I think that'd be an interesting dynamic, right? Or something like that. He needs to do something very different. He doesn't need to be a top guy because dude can get a cheer just doing like not even kicking a guy. I mean, like he's a genius, but one of the smartest workers in the world. But I also think at this point he's caught in a very interesting little spot. He's great where he's at, but his upward mobility, when I look at him and compare him to say Jungle Boy, who I know that like I don't think he's Jungle Boy's the next champ. I think he's the champ after the next champ, whoever that is. So
Yeah, so I guess for me, when I say they're leaving money on the table, Orange Cassidy should be in movies. He should be in guest appearances in music videos. And they've done this with Cody Rhodes. They've done this with the Young Bucks. They've done this with all these people who have book deals. And that's what I mean by leaving money on the table with Orange Cassidy, where Orange Cassidy is an amazing marketing tool for AEW. And I don't think that they understand what they have. Because I would watch wrestling events in the indies with Orange Cassidy just because Orange Cassidy was on the card. And I wanted to see him come out. And for those who've never seen an Orange Cassidy title defense, he comes out to Jane. And he has the title in a backpack. And he's walking out when he was the champ with the title in a backpack, all nonchalant. And it was like the anti-wrestler persona. And you're like, most champions come out with the belt and they're all cocky. You just have Orange Cassidy like, I have to be here? Are you kidding me? Like, and it's amazing. And I just think that putting him in a movie, in a cameo movie appearance would be brilliant because then that's where they're leaving money on the table. It's kind of like, I'm trying to think of Impact Wrestling back in the day had deals with NASCAR. Or when WWE has a deal with a music band and, Georgia, Florida Straight Line or whatever they're called, I can't think of their name exactly, would sort of hit a guy and they'd be ringside and they'd get into an argument and would cost somebody a match. And that's where I think AEW is failing with Orange Cassidy. It's not so much the wrestling, it's everything you need to do outside of the ring because AEW hasn't turned a profit yet. And I think Orange Cassidy can help get them closer in that direction.
Are you sure? Because I've heard them claim otherwise.
I don't think they've turned a profit yet. I don't think they have. I mean, that's what I've heard. And now I could be mistaken, but my understanding is that they're still a new company, and I don't think they have. And so this is where it gets super interesting is that there's rumors on both sides. So that's what I've heard.
Well, all right. Let's go both ways here. Let's assume they haven't made their money yet. All right. Although I think they'd be close considering their network deals, connections worldwide. They got money rolling in. They really, really do. So, but okay, what does Orange Cassidy want to do? Because he might also just be content wrestling right now. Right? And there is that aspect of it too. It's one thing to say, okay, yeah, talent can go here, 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 and here. On the other hand, a talent might be like, you know what, I just want to wrestle. And
so I agree that talent should have control. Where it gets complicated is when you're running a wrestling business, you have to sometimes do things that benefit the business and benefit the company. And I don't want to say you have to toe the company line, but, to some degree, sometimes there's a bigger picture going on.
sure.
I've had the privilege of interviewing Kazarian, and I asked him about the NASCAR deal back before he was in AEW. And he was saying, looking back on it, it made a lot of sense because it brought in fans, it got people speaking. It's the whole thing why Rob Gronkowski hosted WrestleMania. It brought eyes in. Whole concept why Bad Bunny was at WrestleMania brings eyes in. So at a certain point, I think that, look, I don't want to force anybody to do anything. And I think that wrestlers should have a choice. But sometimes you also have to understand that this is good for the business. And this is not just good for myself anymore. Where if all of a sudden Orange Cassidy is on a movie tour, he's in 6 movies, and then it brings in another 500,000 fans into AEW, it's going to rise every wrestler up. and then maybe some of those people get retained. And that's obviously an exaggeration and a perfect storm, but it's the idea that that's sort of the mentality. And it gets tricky because that's where I'm going, and that's what I just think is so interesting about Orange Cassidy, because I feel he can be the guy to do that.
Oh, he's got the ability to do it, I'm sure. Again, I'm of two minds on that, because I get it. Like, when I work for somebody, I have to, play by the rules. It doesn't mean, though, there's always room for negotiation, though. It's like, well, if I do this, like what do I get? Especially if it's something above and beyond what I'm being asked. Like, let's say my contract calls for whatever it calls for. If I'm getting asked above and beyond what I'm doing, I don't mind taking one for the team. But at the same time, it's like, okay, what am I getting out of this that I really want? Especially if I don't want to do it, right? And that's a very it's a tricky line. Yeah, it's a tricky line, because I get where you're coming from. You want to grow the company, you want to do what's right for the company to some degree, but you also got to do what's right for you, because there's gonna I've had this talk with I don't know if you listened to my interview with Dirk, but we had this conversation about comics, and specifically, you go into any company, doesn't matter what it is, you're only in a company for a set period of time. That's it. That is life. There is no magic bullet. There's no magic way to stay in any one place anymore. That doesn't really exist.
Very few people have that privilege, and the few people who do are golden for life. But there's like maybe 10 of them in the entire world.
Mm-hmm. So here's the thing.
Those 10. Sorry to interrupt. Continue.
No, it's all good. So I think you get where I'm going with this. You're only in this for a set period of time. So on one hand, this is where I see where you're coming from. You want to maximize your impact while you're there. On the flip side, there's also I truly think there's going to be more of a negotiation going forward for companies and people about what people want. Because I'm looking at okay, if I'm getting paid to throw coffee at Starbucks, the same amount of money as I am doing another job, I'm just going to go to Starbucks because fuck it, right? Because it's not that it doesn't have its moments.
The free coffee perks and stock options matter.
Yeah, they do. They do. I'm not even bullshitting that. They do, right? But here's my point. If you want me to go above and beyond something I don't want to do to make a living, I have plenty of options for that, right? Right? What you want, ideally in a perfect world, like I said, I'm working for a company right now, right? As a freelancer, but I'm working for a company right now. I'm under contract for a bit. Guess what? I'm building a show. Why? Because I have the experience to build a show, and I'm putting the effort in, and I'm enjoying the challenge of it. But I also know this too. I mean, it may not be today or tomorrow. It might even be a year from now. But somewhere down the road, they're going to say, "Josh, thanks for everything you've done. Bye. We need to move in a different direction," and vice versa, or maybe vice versa. I get a better offer somewhere down the road. It's like, "Thank you for everything, guys. I got to move in a different direction." Like, nothing's permanent anymore.
So the point I'm trying to make is that when you're in the entertainment world, it gets complicated because the saying is that it's all temp work, in which that, if you're a school teacher, it's not temp work if you have tenure and you do your job and you do what you're supposed to do. If you work because it's harder to get fired, or if you're in the government and in bureaucracy, as long as you're not stealing files or doing something horrific, you're going to pretty much be there for life unless, something crazy happens or there's, reconciliation or something along those lines. But once you have a number of years in there, if you do the bare minimum, you're there for life. Mm-hmm. So, but if you're freelancing or you're a wrestler because you're an independent contractor, you might be under contract. And so Orange Cassidy, for instance, might have a 3-year contract or a 5-year contract. And, either your contract has to be bought out or they don't renew your contract. So you have a set amount of time and a set amount of money that you're going to be making in that point if you show up and do your job. But I also understand that when you're growing a company and you're in entertainment, that sometimes, you got to do what's best for the company. And it gets so tricky because I think what's happening, though, in wrestling in particular is I think wrestlers have gotten to the point where they now have a lot more negotiating power for the first time in probably 30 or 40 years. And it's because there's more competition, there's more options. And at this stage, with AEW, those guys can wrestle and those girls can wrestle in a lot of different places versus in WWE. Now, there's advantages to having both. Obviously, WWE, if you're wrestling there, you're part of a bigger machine. There's also prestige. Also, if you're in WWE for 8 years and you come out, you right now might be able to charge more money per matches when you go back to the indies than if you were on AEW for 3 years just because of the prestige number and its former WWE star attached to it. And I don't know the exact, so I don't want to be quoted on that. But it's also, people also dream about being in WWE. Sure. Anthony Green's a great example of that, where all he wanted to do was be in WWE. It had nothing to do with money. And so, but I think that, Orange Cassidy doesn't want to be in movies. That's fine. I'm not here to force somebody to do anything. But I do think people need to understand in the wrestling business, wrestling is a very small niche. And anytime you could bring in an audience and capture an audience away from wrestling, and you have the ability to do that, it's good for, yourself as a brand. It's also good for the brand that you're working for. And I hate to say this, but if you want to stick around in entertainment, sometimes you got to do things you don't want to do because you curry favor with people and you come out as a standout guy and a stand-up guy. So there's a lot of stuff going on that's beneficial when you might not exactly love to do something that you don't want to do, if that makes any sense.
Well, again, I think there's two sides to that coin. I think it's good. It's interesting because we're coming to a very interesting point in that. Okay, we talked about this a little bit last time. I've been expanding on my thinking process with this as time goes on.
I tend to do that too.
Yeah, but one of the things I realize is right now the real thing and this is just us in general, it's to bring our name value as high up as what we possibly can. That's the objective. So my goal is to never need to work for a company. That's my actual goal. If that's my real goal, then the way to do that is to get my name and increase my audience as broadly as possible. I'm making this very simple because this is just because there's a lot of steps in that. But
it's complicated, but we're simplifying it and dumbing it down a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. But essentially, here's the thing. I get a big enough audience. You get a big enough audience. We can command things like sponsorship monies, and we can command things like, we can advertise better. We can make ourselves bigger. The bigger our audience, the more someone may want us on their networks, brands, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what makes this really, really interesting and really, really, really tough and difficult and stuff is there's a point where it shifts to like, okay, the company is a benefit to me. Let's say I'm a writer and I'm trying to get into a big 5 publishing house. Seems great in paper. It seems awesome on paper. But when you look at that, then think about it. It's like, okay, what do I do? What do I offer? Which of these houses benefit me the most? Which one will actually benefit me? And if none of these other houses benefit me, it's actually worth me to do it. I think what's going to end up happening in all forms of entertainment is there's going to be Andrew Mecha Davis, podcaster extraordinaire, investor, businessman, world dominator, possible king of the world. I don't know, but we may not go that far. But,
I'm a benevolent king. I want to just make it clear you heard it here first.
Okay. The benevolent king, Andrew Mecha Davis. And then there's me, I joke about this. I have a big mouth. People pay me for it now. It's kind of funny and strange and true. I do get paid for that. So here's the thing. I have more leverage right now than I've ever had. If someone else comes to me and says, hey, we'd love to do a project for you. I can't host another show right now unless I'm paid to do it. I actually can't. So that's that's a very interesting leverage point I have right there.
I agree where I am not at that stage, but I don't want to host another show right now unless I'm also being paid for it. You know, I also am at a weird stage in my life where I'm making money for the first time doing a podcast. And, I'm not getting rich off of it per se, but, a lot of infrastructure is being built right now. And I also understand that if I don't like a sponsor, I could tell them to go jump in a lake because there's a lot of opportunity. And what I found is that I rejected a sponsor and then another one came along immediately. And so I have a lot of leverage. And also, my sponsor, my first sponsorship, has me covered, at least on the basics of the show's premise, for another 11 months, which also gives me a lot of leverage. So I don't have to bark at the first deal if I don't like something or I think it's going to hurt my brand, the sponsorship. And so it's very, very interesting when you're in circumstances. And I've only hit up 2 or 3, people interested in, I guess a top tier sponsorship, not a live read per se, but an actual sponsorship. And so, I haven't actually actively pursued. I just, hit up the right person, made a great pitch, and they said yes, and I decided to run with it. Because why wouldn't I take a good deal when I see it, And I'm not going to go him and haw when it's a beneficial. And this is where I go into where I don't know if I used to go to a lot of anime cons and a lot of comic cons doing lectures, and I never got paid for any of that. And I don't know if I'm going to go back because I realize right now that a lot of money is in the online space. There's a lot of opportunity, and I have more leverage than I ever had in my life before. I choose 98% of my guests come on my show. I choose, and legitimately, I have a form that has like 50 people on it, and I've only picked 20 out of it. And I openly say, look, I pick who I want on my show. Nobody tells me what questions to ask. Nobody tells me what I can and can't say. And nobody is ever going to tell me. And if I have to self-fund for that freedom, I'm going to go do that. Because at the end of the day, and my sponsors don't have any say on who I interview and how I do it. Now, I'm not going to go let somebody go and use certain words on my show after a while just because I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody. I don't want to be overly hateful with not making a point, if that makes any sense. But it's amazing what's going on right now in our society because you and me both have massive leverage. Like, I didn't have to come on your show at any point, and you didn't need to interview me either. But it's this idea that, and you're going to have something going on in December, and spoiler alert, you're coming on my show. I don't have to have you on my show. I want you on my show. And that's where this is so interesting now. And you don't have to come on my show, and you could tell me to go take a hike.
Yeah.
And so it's
I'm not going to do that. It's just don't. That's also just bad business. It's just
no. But I think the point is being made, and I think this relates to wrestling. And I think people have to understand this and how it relates to comics is that at this stage, there are very few circumstances people don't have leverage in. And now I feel because of COVID, and it's so interesting. And I don't know how to describe it, but I'm loving it because I have real power now in my life and I have real control. And it's so interesting, and I'm curious, and I'm at the beginning of it, everybody. So there are people who've been doing this for the last 3-4 years, and I'm at the beginning of this entire thing. So for me, this is 4 months, starting in my 4th month of this, and I can't wait for the next 2.5 years.
So for me, it was a headspace thing. When I was doing this, I started this for fun. Or it was kind of like one of those happy accident kind of deals. I started taking it seriously as my viewer, as I won my first award for the show. I've been nominated a couple times for some things, and just apparently I'm good at this. Who knew? And I'm not trying to belittle myself saying that. I just like one of those things. Like I did shit, things happen. I just kept going. Things have happened. I keep going. Things happen. So all of which to say that suddenly you find yourself like this. What happens is you kind of become what they call an expert in the field. And once that happens, once people recognize you for that, you get to command certain leverage and respect, and it's an interesting balancing act. And then, but I will say one thing that it took me a long time to realize this. Everything's a negotiation and has been for as long as I've been alive. I only now do it like I realize just how much like say I have on how things are done.
I mean, we could talk about that 'cause that's so interesting. You crossing the street is a negotiation.
Yes.
If you look at it now, I'm not gonna go Chris Voss. I don't want to go Chris Voss at anybody. I don't know. Do you know who Chris Voss is?
I don't. But is he the dude? Like is he the dude that makes deals?
I don't think he makes deals. He was the lead FBI hostage negotiator for like 20 years in the U.S.
Okay, yeah.
So he has a company called the Black.
Yeah, I'm aware of him. I'm aware of this gentleman. I don't know him by name, but I am aware of this gentleman. Yes.
And he has a master class, and the advertisement on his master class is that going to Starbucks is a negotiation, or coffee in the morning is a negotiation, crossing the streets is a negotiation. That's why I brought it up. Is that I do think everything's a negotiation, but not everything you negotiate on. Because if you were to negotiate on everything, you go crazy. If you go to the grocery store and negotiate for your milk, you have a bigger issue. Like you go to the cashier, like you like at a certain point, I'll negotiate for a comic book, and that's like a variant on the wall where somebody's asking $90 in a comic shop. I'm not going to negotiate for the $4 comic book on New Comic Book Wednesday. Okay, like at a certain point, but I that's beside the point. So I definitely agree that everything's a negotiation.
No, again, it's about picking your battles for sure. Although I will tell you, my grandmother taught me an awful lot about negotiation. She would negotiate at the grocery store, but this was back in the day before points. This was back in the day when it was just coupons. You get some steals, man. You get some freaking steals if you knew how to play that game. One of the reasons the point system in coupon, like the existing stores now, is so they don't have to deal with coupons as much. Because the moment a coupon gets involved and you see a price cheaper, you suddenly have leverage with the company. Whereas if you got points, nobody cares.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I don't think that people view me in the podcasting world as an expert. I've been doing this for a long time, almost 9 years at this point. I know how to build an interview. But, and I was going to be teaching a podcasting class, but that deal fell through. And honestly, there are so many better people who I feel are more qualified to go through podcasting and teaching and being those experts. I personally just know how to build an interview. It took me a long time. I could give advice on the topic, and I have no problem doing that, but I am the furthest thing from an expert on those issues. So yeah, that's super interesting.
I would argue different, man. You actually been doing this longer than I have. I've only been podcasting for 6 years. I'm in my 7th year now, but I mean, you've done it longer than I have. It's just, I maybe it's just maybe from a point of view of interest. Like you had, like we've talked about this last show. You're a man with many different goals. And this may not be, I'm not going to say where it's not the same passion per se, but like I've embraced my big mouth. It's kind of like the path of my success. And you are a shrewd operator, my friend. I'll just give you that. You're a shrewd operator. And I think though,
so I'll explain it. I'll explain it a little different. So for me, my podcast is a business. So the way I view what I'm doing is that my company is a holding company. It is not a podcasting company. Now, I don't know if I have a big mouth or not. I tend to like to talk. I like to interview, and that's what I like to do. And I also like to dive into things. I really appreciate people like Joe Rogan, Howard Stern, Larry King. Obviously I like those people, and I find that interviewing is a lot less taxing because I came from the world of curation. Prior to my interviewing career, I was on YouTube, and I got way out of control where I was trying to do YouTube videos breaking down every comic book and doing this, and I got burned out from all that. And So that's my entire thing, is that I guess I came from a world that destroyed a lot of what I enjoyed. And then when I came into interviewing, it did the opposite. It enhanced what I wanted to enjoy, because now I'm getting more insight into it. Now I'm actually getting to read it. And now we get to talk about it. Now I get to ask cooler questions and actually get to talk to a person, and it's not a sole operation. But for me, the whole thing with my podcast and Pop Anime Comics Lounge was that this is a business. My website's a business, and I don't really know exactly where it's going and how to fully monetize every little component, but I do have, obviously a t-shirt side to this, and it's a passive business position where I'm building out a shirt every quarter, and then I just throw it up on Redbubble and I don't touch it, and I leave it be and I let it do what it needs to do on its own, a little bit of marketing, a little bit of pushing it out, and all of a sudden what starts happening is that, you start building out designs and some other stuff. So that's kind of my entire thing. And hopefully I could be seen. I don't know if I could be seen. It's all good. But that's kind of my whole thing. So that's how I view everything.
So what's your Redbubble?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I don't know my little head. It should be under Pop Anime Comics. It's just like, I'm a little big. Just I'm pulling it up right now to make sure I know what it is, because this is really not good.
No, Andrew, we're trained professionals, right? We're
clearly. Again, this is how passive it is. Is that I am making it so that it's completely passive. I am absolutely trained. This is what I do. I don't really even promote it. I'm the worst. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, like I said, we are trained professionals, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we're gonna say. Trained professionals. With the other show I'm doing.
Pop. So I found it. Everybody. It's Pop Anime Comics is my thing. I only have one design out there. It's kind of making fun of some stuff with Gundam and Taco Bell, and
Did I get it?
The most interesting man in the world. And yes, I think that's me. Hopefully that's me.
Okay.
And if it's not, we're giving somebody free promotion tonight, and they probably need it a lot more than I do, because they probably deserve it at this point. Clearly.
No. Note to self. I am going. You realize I'm going to make fun of you with this like forever now, right?
It's all right. It's all right. See, at least what it is. This just shows how passive it is. I spend a lot of time building out my t-shirt designs, and what I mean by a lot of time is I hire some guy in Malaysia to do it in 5 days or less on Upwork. Like, so I couldn't. But the design process for me is actually more in concept than in art, because that's the least of the problem, where I'm not an artist, but I'll come up with an idea. So that idea for my shirt, making fun of the most interesting man in the world, Amuro Ray from Gundam, and Taco Bell, all in one thing, that idea took like 2 months to come up with and figure out how to do it, because it just doesn't pop into your head, creativity like that. And making fun of, all three things and how to structure it. That took a long time to figure out. But the actual building of the design and hiring somebody legitimately took 5 days.
Fair enough. No, it varies. I've got a few t-shirts on my own Redbubble. You can take a look at them if you want. There's a unicorn that farts rainbows on there. There's my logo for the podcast there if you want something there. But it's not. Much like you, I don't promote it as much as I should, but at least I do know that people want to find it. But it's one of those things where this business goes a bunch of different ways, and it works with a bunch of different things. And the product with a podcast is your audience, whether people realize it or not. That's the real product with it. The content is how you get an audience. And your audience is what opens doors for you to go into other places. That is podcast modeling 101. The business of it, the more audience you have, the more you can command in terms of sponsorships and leverage for everything else you do.
Yeah, and it's also, I think sometimes it's also it's also the loyalty and the engagement, where if you have a tribe that is just dedicated to you and it's a small tribe, but they're a very buying tribe, meaning that, if you had, that's also a factor, I feel, where sometimes you
Mhm.
don't need a big audience, but if you have, a 5,000 person audience, and every time you mention a health, product that's a $500 product, all of them buy it because they trust you, you can command a decent amount of money as well, because, all of a sudden what starts happening is that, well, you're trusted in that group. It's
Absolutely.
very interesting, and, I'm figuring out, but I didn't build that t-shirt for my podcast. That had nothing to do with it.
No.
That concept was that I just know there's Gundam fans, and I know there's a bunch of fans who are like me, who are crazy for Gundam as a franchise, and they're gonna come across that shirt at some point and be like, "I need this shirt. This is brilliant." And it has nothing to do with my podcast. It is a separate business completely. And that's the entire thing with that, is that and then also, what it is? It just exists, and I don't push it out on my podcast. I have shirts on Pro Wrestling Tees that deal with my podcast. Um, but again, I just wanted t-shirts, and they're on print on demand, so it doesn't cost me any money to have any of this stuff on a
No.
merchandising level too. And why not have it? And just there, and then figure out how to monetize it effectively later when I built this Pro Wrestling T side like 6 years ago out. So there you go.
Yeah, you go. How is Pro Wrestling Tees, anyways? Is it a good company?
I like them. I don't really do many sales because I don't promote heavily on there. But what I like about them is I can place, because I have a store, I can place orders, and I could order 25 shirts or more for $6 a pop. So when
That's
I
actually
want to
really
go
good.
and so when I want to, and then it goes down. If I ordered 100 or 200 or 300, obviously you can get it down to like $5. So all of a sudden, if I'm going to a con, and technically you don't have to put, you can print shirts that are not on your store, if that makes any sense, if you have a store. So I can go take my Amare Gundam t-shirt and print it with Pro Wrestling Tees for, $6, $7 a shirt, and I could print 50 of them and then bring it to a con if I have a table at a con, for instance. But I don't have to sell it on their thing, but I have a store. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it
What I
totally
just
does. It totally
explained.
does. No, it's they give you some options, which is really good. No, I was just curious about them because I'm using Redbubble right now because merchandising is it's an interesting nightmare in of itself. It's just to figure it all out, but yeah, it's one of those things that
And yeah. Also, you don't want to carry the debt of having 300 t-shirts. So I understand this because in my comic book business side of things that I sell on eBay, I carry a lot of inventory. I right now have about $10,000 of books that I want to move in the next 3 months, plus. And then I have about 4,000 comics downstairs. Not all of them are for sale. I would say at least 1,500 of them are for sale. And that number of what I have is estimated anywhere from 35,000 to $70,000 worth of books. So that's a lot of merchandise to be carrying for a one person operation. So
absolutely.
I don't want to be carrying another $1,000 of t-shirts on top of all of that. I don't want to be carrying that, and that's why I will use Redbubble or Pro Wrestling Tees, because I don't know if inventory counts as debt, but I don't know the full extent of how you calculate debt, but my inventory is not a liability because it's already paid for in my comic book business. And I would prepay my t-shirts, but I don't want to have to do that if I could just print on demand. And I'd rather make $5 on a t-shirt, but not have the cost of having to do it and make like $15 on a t-shirt, because, well, it's just that money up front or money in the back. It's just how you want to structure it.
Yeah, no, it's all about structure, but no, it depends on your state. Like some states will write off like your inventory better than others. Every It's knowing your taxes on that. There's usually some wiggle room. How much is an open question though? Because that can vary from state to state.
But it also goes to the idea is that how much finances do you have at any given point? And so for me, the idea is that if I go out and I spend $500 on T-shirts, and I know it's going to take me, 3 years to go through that, I don't want to store it. I don't want to spend $500 and then have to sell it. And then what happens if I change my logo in 18 months, or I want to put a new design? Until I sell out my old T-shirts, I can't bring in my new T-shirts. Or if I want to change up the color, so if all of a sudden, and then on places like Redbubble, and this, somebody could change up the color. I personally love blue shirts. I hate red shirts. I don't want to wear a red shirt. So if your shirt is only a red shirt, I'm not going to buy your shirt, if that makes any sense. But if all of a sudden you have a red shirt and a blue shirt, there you go. And so if I printed 300 red shirts and you hate red shirts, you might not buy my T-shirt even if you love my show or you love this shirt. But if all of a sudden, and then if I want to sell you a shirt, I might have to go print a black shirt or a blue shirt, and it becomes just a whole merchandising pain in the ass for me.
And this is just T-shirts, folks. This isn't mugs or anything else, right?
I won't do mugs. I won't do mugs because I don't want to ship mugs either. That's the other thing. I do not want to ship a mug. Ever. Mm-hmm. I don't want to ship glass. I'm terrified to ship comics as they are. I'm terrified to ship CGCs.
And as someone that's worked in the shipping industry, your fears are very well justified. I won't give you horror stories, but I just will say some of your fears are justified. Seal them well.
I mean, my shipping on eBay is $11 for a standard comic. The reason why is that I ship in a Gemini, I bubble wrap it, I double bag and board it, and then I buy insurance on it. So God forbid something happens, I'm not screwed and you're not screwed. Mm-hmm. That's why I do it. And so somebody might be selling you a book for $7 and I won't ship. And I'm not going to tell you who shipped in this, and I have visuals here, but I won't ship in one of these. I'm not shipping your book in one of these books, in one of these little things. I will ship in, actually, sort of have somewhat Gemini here, but I will ship in something like this.
Yep.
And it will be bubble wrapped, it will be taken care of, and there's a reason why, because your book will arrive perfectly the way it's supposed to, how it was advertised.
Yeah. Unless somebody's really careless in the shipping company. That won't be your fault. It's like, it's not going to be my fault. Right? So.
And that's why I get insurance. I just shipped out a $110 book. I got $100 worth of insurance, and I paid the extra $3. Now, I think that book's going to arrive perfectly, and I'm hoping it does. But, I said to my buyer, look, I just insured it for $100, on my end. And so I charged $11. I think with insurance, it came up to like $14. But again, I'm covering my ass, and I'm making sure that I'm taken care of and that my buyer's taken care of, because all of a sudden, they get a problem with it. It comes bent, because I haven't had a book like get bent in half per se yet. But, I want to know that somebody says, look, I'm taking all the precautions to protect you. And so that's where I'm at.
No, I totally get it. Again, I've seen books shipped. It does it if you do a good job. Like I said, it is possible it can get wrecked, but I've worked in the shipping industry. I see what happens when things get really busy. And folks, if you get what you pay for, that we'll leave it at that. You get exactly what you pay for when you ship, and for good or bad. But no, like what you're talking about in terms of inventory and stuff, like these are things I'm thinking about as a business guy too. It's like, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? But for me, like one of the things I'm playing with right now is my voice. I just did an advertisement on yesterday for a sponsor. My next sponsor, which starts tomorrow. And it's like, you cool with this? They gave me a thumbs up. So for the next 6 weeks, they get an ad specifically for their work and their benefit. And it's just like, cool, right? And I'm enjoying voice work. I'm building up a nice little voice resume. So if I want to do advertisements for different like podcasts or sponsors or networks, I've done it. Like I've done about 10 of them now that I think are actually decent, and it opens up another door of what I can do.
So is that on your show, or is it on just somebody else's, or they're just
it's just my show. So it's like, this podcast is sponsored by so and so because you like.
Oh, it's like what I do with my sponsor.
But I said, I create an ad. Like I'll create an ad. I'll make sure that they like what I'm saying, because I'm not because I'm representing them too, and I'm very well aware of this, right? So I'll give them a link, and if they want to make a change, we'll make a change.
You're doing more work than you should be.
Oh no, maybe, but I am getting paid for it, right? And I figured out. So
let me tell you what I do with my ads. I say, you write the copy, and then I'll edit the copy slightly so it has a little more of a beat. So I say, look, I don't know everything about your company, and I don't know what's important in your company and what's not. I'm well aware that my sponsor was Mixum. So I said, I know Mixum's a printing company, and they print comics. And, I don't know if I mentioned a dirty word. If I did, I didn't think Mixum was that bad. I love Mixum. They do a fantastic job with comics. And so I said to them, look, why don't you write the copy, and then I make slight changes on what I know is going to work. But and the reason why I do this is because they might have a promotion they're running. And so I want to make sure that they get what they want highlighted in there. And that's how I run. So I think because
I agree with it. This is what I have found. Okay. So I will go to them. Okay, you got 30 seconds to a minute, right? I would rather be closer to 30 because people are going to stop paying attention after about 30 seconds. But if you want to go a little longer, I mean, I know the boss of my show, he's a dick, but I mean, I can negotiate with him, right? So I go up, do an ad, and I'll get this copy. I remember, so I ended up with one of my sponsors. They gave me like this brick of an ad, and I looked at them. I read it out loud, which, by the way, was great advice for when you're writing something. If you want to know how it's going to sound, read it aloud. It'll tell you everything you need to know. But I ended up just writing the ad, and I've done this for a few people because everybody's got like an idea of what they want to say. So I'll listen to what you want to say. I'll listen to any promotions. I always ask those questions up front, right? But I'm like, okay, give me the promotions. What you want to promote. Give me like the important stuff, like dates, things of that nature. Give me your slogan if you got a slogan, and I'll put something together. Because I find I will for sure hit 30 seconds, or I'll hit 40 seconds, and I'm good with that. If I give it to them, it's like big giant block of brick that you can't say in 2 minutes, let alone.
So I'm about a minute with Mixum, which is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why is that they're giving a 5% promotion, and I come out swinging with it too, which is fun. And then usually with a live read, I'm about 45 seconds with a live read. If I have a live read in my show, so that's kind of where I'm at, because I want to speak a little bit slower sometimes, and I want to just and I don't mind going over. And I get that people have short attention spans, but I try to make it as fun as possible, and I try to place it in the right place as much as I can, and I think it's working. It's just that right now is like the worst time for everything, and also I'm just figuring out my next few sponsors, and I'm gonna take a few weeks off from some sponsorships, and then I'm gonna be hitting it, and obviously I'm gonna probably be going a little bit heavier in the new year. And I'm probably going to start setting stuff up for, season 3 and what's going on with that, because that's just complicated, for lack of a better word. But I'm not beating myself up at this time of the year, because this time of the year I'm winding down this show and I'm ending season 2-ish, I guess. So, I'm not worrying too much about sponsorships at the moment, but definitely going to be hitting 2022 a lot harder on that front. And look, I'm not trying to make money. I'm just trying to fund the show and then get a little bit more out of it as well, and maybe, be able to buy myself a 6-pack every month.
Almost there for me. I'm at that point. Like I said, I'm about another gig away from being able to, between gigs, sponsors, and something else, I'd be making a living being a creative, which I think is that's a cool spot to be in. And not quite there yet, but I'm close.
So this is my question. I don't know what a gig is versus a sponsorship. So I know what a sponsorship is. I know what live reads are. Is a gig just a contract for you?
Well, yeah, for just a contracted gig, like my show. So this is this is my gig. So every Thursday I do a YouTube show on Canadian immigration. Very different than what I do here. Not as loose.
Yeah. No. The reason why I ask is that I've heard people say, "Oh, I'm producing somebody else's show. I'm an executive producer. I'm a producer."
I do those too. I will do those. I'm open to doing those. I'm just getting into that part of it now too. So we were talking about expertise stuff earlier, right? One of the things it took me a long time to realize, not many people actually know how to put a show together.
Agreed. It's tricky. I don't think. I mean, so, and you tell me your thoughts on this. Where there's been a bunch of people who have been on my show, when I started doing the live stuff. So the live stuff is brand new to me, and I started in 2020. So this live stuff is new to me. But I think a lot of people, don't know how to start with a concept of a podcast and then bring it all the way to fruition. And I think what is the magic number is like 10. Most people don't make it on their show past 10 episodes, from my understanding, from what I know.
All right.
I don't know. I don't know if you heard differently. That's what I heard.
No, that's about right.
And then so, I used to give a lecture at cons about, hey, how do you get into podcasting and anime? And the idea was that what I really wanted to do is I just wanted to inspire a bunch of people to say, hey, look, you can do this too. This isn't that hard, guys. And everybody, you can do it. I didn't say you're going to make $1 million or anything like that, but you can do it. And here's some tips and stuff like that. And just get creative juices flowing with people. Because sometimes somebody needs just a role model or another person they know doing it. Say, oh, I can do this too. This person looks like me. So what happened with me when I started doing the live stuff is that within, I think, my first 2 months, then about 10 people started doing shows. Out of those 10 people, 8 of them are not doing their shows or haven't touched their show in over 14 months. So they did like 20 episodes and then they dropped off. And then now they're talking about coming back, but you're coming back 12 months later. And now the whole thing is that, like, I don't think, these people know how rigorous this is. It is tough to do a podcast. It takes a lot of dedication. Even if you think you're just messing around with your friends, meeting every, Friday night, grabbing a beer and then reviewing Netflix shows, that is not an easy thing to do because you still got to show up. You got to actually be interesting. Everybody has to, make sure the kids are tucked in, your wife, your girlfriend, your husband, your boyfriend, they're all good. There's not a family emergency going on. And then you got to actually make it interesting. Then you got to market it. Then you got to come up with logos. You got to go all over the place with it. And not to mention that also there's structural things that have to get done. And I just think that so many people don't understand how difficult this is. And then they get into like, holy freaking smokes, this is going to kill me. And then they drop out.
That's part of it. Here's the other part. I just talked to somebody about a month ago. And we were talking about she wanted to do a podcast. Popular writer, has lots of neat things to say. I always enjoy it when I chat with her. But I also told her, it's like, okay, what you need to figure out, the first thing, I always go like this, from a structure standpoint, the very first thing is, how long do you want your show to be? Right? Now, since I've done Twitch, I go a lot longer than I used to. I used to just do an hour max. Now I do 2 hours max, or right around 2 hours max, unless the conversation's really good. Then we go longer, then I cut the show in half. Because that's just the way to do it. But I do it like that because that gives me a structure in my head, how long we can go, how long we can comfortably go. Then I'm like, well, what do I want to talk about? I like interviewing people. If I didn't, the show would not have gone along as long as it has. That's been my saving grace. If I didn't enjoy this, I wouldn't be doing this. It's a lot of work. It's dealing with people, dealing with egos, dealing with people that can some people you just get the feeling that they're not very genuine. Some people although this has not happened very often on my show, you already had a guest about halfway through the show you just realized you don't like.
Hey, it only happened once, and that was last time we spoke, right? Yeah, I know the feeling. Have you ever had an interview where you're like, this person is just not a good person? It's not even that you don't like them. You're like, this person is in this position for all the wrong reasons. They're just not a good person. They're not a good person at their core. You disagree with them on a moral level, on possibly an economic level, on a philosophical level. Like, I've had that. I only had it once, and it's the oddest feeling. And I'm like, I went to like my mom, and I'm like, that went bad. And then I like called like 15 people, and I'm like, this just went bad. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to feel, because it was just everything was disagreement. And look, I interview people, not to get too deep into this. I have a unique political view on things where I call things like they are, but I don't have a problem interviewing people I disagree with. I would say it's 50-50. People agree with a lot of what I say and people disagree. But most of the times, it only happened once where I was just like, I can't get my head around this person. Like, we're not connecting, and there's just two big fundamental differences on it. And I just felt horrific after the interview. And I'm like, this is exactly everything that I am not. And not in a good way. It's not like, somebody thinks that you should have UBI and I don't think you shouldn't have UBI. Or, somebody likes cats and I like dogs. It wasn't that. It was that this person is everything I am not. And they are in things for the wrong reason. And we got to the point of the interview, and I was professional enough to handle it and get through the interview. But I'm like, I can't have this person back ever again, and I don't even want to publish the interview because it was that bad. And it wasn't a bad interview. It was just like fundamentally something was lacking. Very complicated.
No, it happens. I'll tell you about like one of I don't have many what I would call bad interviews. This one. So there's one that was a complete train wreck, but there was nothing I could do than just ride the storm and just get it over with. That one I don't.
Except for Chuckpino, he is always a train wreck, but he's an enjoyable train wreck.
Oh, Chuck? Oh yeah.
So, I see. We could say that because Chuck knows we're kidding.
So okay, I'll give you a fun Chuck. So Chuck came on my show the first time he came to talk to me. First time. Okay, I told him I was a metal fan. The look on his face was like, oh yeah, like there's almost that. Prove it. So the first band I bring out is Amon Amarth, and now all of a sudden you could just see the look in Chuck's eyes change. It went from, yeah, right, that guy's no metal. Oh shit, he is a metal guy, and you could literally watch it in his eyes. It was fantastic. So, and then because so the other thing me and Chuck have in common is we're both Canadian. We both grew up in Ontario, so we have a similar opinion about London, Ontario, and I told the story of my London experience, and we clicked on that so well because we both had been there and done that. It was like, yeah, we get along as well. Chuck's a very sweet guy. All serious. I am a little jealous of his pink earmuffs. I am jealous of that a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. But besides
of his what?
The pink headphones he wears all the time now.
Oh yeah.
Right.
But, so let me tell Chuck's story that shows how nice he is. So in 2020, I was in a bit of a rough financial position, and I scraped enough money to back Bilal, I think it is, or Bilal. I don't know how we say his
Bilal.
comic, which
Bilal, but yeah.
Belial. And so, I basically got the Steph Wilson cover because that's kind of, I like Steph's, style. I like the way he does things. And then I said to Chuck, I said, I just backed that one. Chuck's like, oh, did you get the other one too? And I'm like, yeah, man, I really can't afford it. It's like, don't worry about it. I'll just throw it into your package. Sean will just write it down. No worries. It's no skin off our back. And so, obviously, because I interviewed and they were like, yo, you're interviewing us. You're promoting this book out like crazy. And I'm like, oh, really? That's so nice. And then I opened up, I completely forgot about it. I'm like, oh, snap. I totally forgot that they actually remembered because I hate to say this and I'm very cynical. A lot of people blow smoke up your ass and say, I'll take care of you. I got you covered. I got your back. When this comes in, I'm going to take care of you because you took care of me. And I was like pleasantly surprised. And then I shot Chuck and Sean. I said, hey, guys, I really appreciate that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and but yeah, so that's something that I think people don't know, and that it actually hasn't been spoken about. And it's not like a big story, but that's who Chuck is as an individual, and that's who Sean is as well, who is his partner on Bilal or Belil. I'm gonna get the name wrong.
Yeah,
Belial. Wow.
Belial.
You know what? It's Sunday. It's Sunday. I did some writing today. I just came from a movie. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. But the point of the story is that Chuck is a really, really nice guy.
Oh yeah. No, he is legitimately. He's a sweetheart of a human being. He really, really is, and he's one of my favorite. Legitimately speaking, I hope I am lucky enough at some point to work with him someday. Really, I think he'd be great. I think he would. He'd push me, and at the very least, I'd make him laugh his ass off with some of the things that I'd come up with. But
and then I have another story about Chuck. That the reason how my first interview with Chuck went is that I actually dug deep into things like Welcome to the Void and his book that was coming out and a bunch of other stuff. He's like, oh snap, we're actually talking about this, and you actually read this stuff, and you went out and bought this stuff, and he was like shocked because he was like, somebody's actually reading my content and actually asking me legitimate questions about it, which is another thing that bothers the hell out of me, is that when people don't know who I am and don't know my background and don't know where I'm coming from, and you don't need to on every interview, but you should have a basic understanding of who I am as a, person. You should know that I'm into comic book investing. You should know that my show, I got somebody who I interviewed their writing partner, and they're like, hey, I got this thing going on. Do you know who this other writer? I'm like, he was on my show 3 days ago.
That one's a little, I'm a little bit more forgiving of that one a little bit. There's a lot of shows out there. I certainly do not keep track of every single episode on every single show anymore. I can't. There's just no way I can do that. That all said, I have seen your interviews, so I know a little bit about what you do, right, and how you do it. Like, you're a lot more, in comparison, where we're both very different. I'm very free flowing. Let's just talk about stuff and kind of see where the conversation goes.
Except last Tuesday. Last Tuesday yes. was a very free flowing conversation, but that's like once a month now.
Yeah, but right, it's also just the comfort zone in doing an interview too. Like, the more, I probably should be more prepared than I was. I'll tie it back to my most terrible interview that I ever gave was to an editor by the name of Ellen Datlow. Ellen is actually a very sweet person. However, she's also tough as nails. Right. She's great. So within 20 minutes, I realized like I was out of my depth. I was not as prepared as I should have been. That's on me. I'm not even nothing bad about it. It's just my style of interview was not something she wanted to do. And that's fair. I can't really say I could have done something maybe a little better, a little more different. And I didn't. I should.
I had 2 bad interviews. One of them I was just nervous beyond nervous, and I just was not connecting. I got all the names wrong, and the person was nice about it, and I was terrified. And then sometimes you're just having a really bad day where your brain's just not connecting. It wasn't that I wasn't prepared. It was that I was just having something was wrong.
No, dude, it happens. That totally does happen.
And I was just like, and the person was like, you want to redo it? And I said, yeah, let's figure out how to redo this. This was not my best work. And this wasn't live or anything like that. Like, you ever have the questions in front of you. So I write out questions, and guys, I had the questions in front of me. I was getting it wrong. Like something was off that day, and it was not normal. I haven't had one of those days in a long time. Probably the last one I had was like 2 years ago, and this was early on in my career. This was maybe like my 10th interview collectively, almost 7 years ago. So, and then the other one is that sometimes you zig when you needed to zag, and I'm not going to say who it was with, and person just didn't want that type of interview, and I just made a bad judgment call, and that was all it was. And that happens too. Sometimes you want to talk about A and the person wants to talk about B, and sometimes they don't connect, and that's okay sometimes too, because sometimes it's not the easiest thing to figure out. But then sometimes you're interviewing somebody who's an old-time comic writer, and like Chuck Dixon, for instance, you want to talk about Bane, and he wants to talk about Bane. So it's complicated sometimes to figure out. And sometimes also some people are gracious enough to not let you know that you screwed up.
Well, okay, so my approach, this is just an approach to interviews. There really is, I can make a lot of mistakes in an interview, and that's fine. The saving grace, the real saving grace in an interview is a willingness to listen. If you can do that, the interview will not completely suck. Now, some people you will just connect with better than others. That's just the way it works, right? But you'll always have a good interview, at least a good one, if you just listen. That's because that's really that's the secret to it. That's what I have found.
So with the interview where I zigged and he wanted to zag, it wasn't a bad interview structurally. It just wasn't. He wasn't happy with it. There's a difference between somebody being happy with the interview and somebody not being happy with the interview versus that. And it wasn't what that person wanted to achieve. And I think there's a difference with what somebody is trying to achieve and what I'm trying to achieve. Right now, in this interview, I just want to be on your show. Yeah. And whoever's enjoying this and just talking, and people see me and then they see you, and it's like, oh, Andrew Davis is an interviewer and he's actually a person who can converse. It's all I'm trying to achieve here. And I'm also just saying, hey, let's do it. And I don't know, I got nothing going on, and I'm supposed to be writing an interview right now, but this is way more fun.
Well, but also it's also just understanding, like, again, we talk about like putting a podcast together. We're going to just tie this all together, right? You have a very deliberate structure of what you're going with. So that doesn't mean, like, again, going back to the whole negotiation thing, right? That doesn't mean that maybe that day I feel like talking about that thing. But that all said, at the same time, I'm also recognizing this too. This is your show. The way I see it is this too. Although me and you have a similar audience in some ways, it's also a very different audience than others. So you're serving your audience, and I want to introduce myself to your audience. So I'm not going to say like I like my conversations like this, a little less structured. Let's just go with it, kind of see where we go with it. But that all said too, I also understand too, like, let's say your show's at a half hour. I did a half-hour interview today for someone else's show. It's just going to be questions and answers because you only have a half hour. So that gives me a little room to make an ass of myself, but only a little bit, So
yeah, so I mean, I like structure because for me, I've worked in 2 veteran organizations, and you show up, at 8:30, 9 o'clock. You work till 4:30. You get a half an hour lunch. Nobody's like breathing down my neck. I'm writing legislation or writing briefs or reading different things or writing positions. But everything is so structured, and it works for me because I can creatively come up with a solution, but it's organized and it's effective for me, and it's how I function. There's a reason why I spend hours alphabetizing my comic collection. It works for me. It's not an OCD thing. I don't think I have OCD. I may have a slight OCD, but it's the idea that having the A's up front and not knowing where all my Batmans are makes it easier for me to function as a human being when I'm looking for a particular book for a reason, or I want to sell a book, or just knowing that, hey, this is organized so that, and then you line it up in alphabet order in your long boxes, and those long boxes are alphabetized. And for me, that's the whole point of structure, is that I know that when I'm writing an interview, I have a set structure, and it speeds up the writing process for me. Because I know that every interview starts the same. Every interview starts the same, and every interview ends the same. And people can expect a certain thing, and it makes it so that it's easier for me to keep consistency. That doesn't mean every conversation is the same. That doesn't mean that things don't get moved around and we don't go off on tangents to some degree, but there is boundaries in place. And that was intentional, that I set up, 8 years ago, because I knew 8 years ago, this is the only way I can write, and I write in a very linear fashion. And I also want to keep it in a box, and that's what I want to do, because it just works for me, and it's easy, and I don't have to worry too much. And also, I could put facts in there, and what I really want to do is I want to create a template. And even almost like I would love to figure out how to create a drop-down menu to make my interview stuff and go faster. I mean, for me to write an interview takes me anywhere from 2 to 3 hours now, full-on research. It used to take me a week. So that's what templating it, for lack of a better word, has done for me, is that it speeds it up by like 7,000%.
All right, so I'm going to throw this in Andrew's favor, actually, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this. Structure actually breeds creativity. Truthfully, it does. Once you kind of have a set of where you can and can't go, you can work within whatever parameters you have. Sometimes you'll grow past those parameters, and everybody goes on that journey to some degree, right? Or though at least the parameters will change. But what you're doing makes a ton of sense. I'm not even in terms of interviews, I've done interviews for 20 years. So at this point, it's almost second nature, right? Because I've done that many of them, right? So I have a structure, but I'm past the point where I need like a template that's physical. It's just all here, But that took 20 years to get there. That took a long time to get there.
For me, it's not even that I read every question. It's also just that, I'm having Max DeVille on. He has a book, Human Hunters. Just to throw this out there.
Sure.
I don't know every detail about Human Hunters, so I'm going to write some bullet notes about what Human Hunters is, just so that it's a reminder. So there's certain characters that have bios. So I'm going to make sure I have those bios in my Word document next to my thing so I can ask questions off of that. And that just makes 100% sense, because why should I torture myself and have to memorize everything when I could just have another screen open, and then I could actually memorize other things and feel a little bit more relaxed? Because God forbid I forget the character Ragu, for instance, and I'm like, oh snap, I forgot who Ragu is. What do I do now? And then I'm a deer in headlights. So that's the other thing that I do, is that I put pieces of the book and different components and reminders in my interview, because sometimes if you're doing an hour-long show, you might want to just have some notes around to say, oh, Andrew is, you host a show, for instance. I'm going to make sure that in my notes, I know the name of your show, for instance. It would be very bad if I don't know the name of your show and I'm interviewing you. That's something that you should have in your notes. It doesn't mean you might remember it and brownie points for everybody out there in structure. But if I don't criticize anybody for notes, I don't attack anybody for that, because why not? It doesn't affect me one way or the other. In fact, if you come up with notes, I love it.
Oh yeah. So what we're talking about here is how to structure interviews, but also to some degree how to structure a show, right? Because what we're talking about here is creating. I'm just doing something really quick here, because I'm actually quietly checking out your Redbubble page here, because I just want to see it, because yes, okay, you weird little Redbubble thing, you. Okay, so.
Oh, I don't know. My Redbubble's weird. I get it. It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Like I said, trained professionals, right? That's what we are. Let's take a look. And there we go. Dude,
It's
you
a
got
cute little elf.
That's a very cute little elf, man. Gundam Amaru, right? Eating a taco. There you go. I want to take a quick look at this, just real quick. But no, the reason I basically wanted to do a quick check and stuff like that is we're talking about structure, and we're talking kind of like how to put a show together. I'll say this: what Andrew does is better than what I do at this point. I will say this only for one specific reason. If my other show, script's written, like I already know what I'm doing this week for the show because we've already written the script for it. Now, there is a room for things to change. If a major headline happens, because again, we're reading news. So if that happens on Wednesday, the day the show is being finished to be filmed, then we're obviously going to throw our script out a little bit and film that major headline. But we have a structure. And the reason why is we're just building a show. And when you build a show, we have a 15-minute window to create a show. So we kind of know we're going to do this, this, and this. And this is how it's going to work. And people are going to be like, that's how you start. But there comes a point with every show, and this is where I've gotten to, where it's like I can do it in my head and in my sleep because I've just done so many of these. It's like, okay, I do casual conversations, and then at the very end we plug stuff. So I don't have to worry so much about names specifically. And also, I suck at names. I just suck at names. But all of which it's true. I do. It's actually a legitimate. I acknowledge it. I suck at names.
I'm not good at names either, so don't worry about it. I write things down where I'm good at first names, but I also am terrified that I'm going to mispronounce a name. You have an easy name to pronounce, okay? You're Josh. I'm Andrew. It's hard to get our names wrong, but some people have weird names. No offense to those weird names, but some people have very weird last names too, and I don't want to be offensive. And so I ask also, and sometimes I'll spell the name phonetically on how it's supposed to sound because that helps my brain. So I use a lot of tricks to help me to relax me so that I don't have to torture my brain.
That's right. No, and that works for me at this point in the time. It's just like I'm past the point where I'm even worried about making a mistake. Not because I don't make mistakes, I do all the time. I just made one on the air live because it's just what the hell, right? But
so in my defense, and what I'm going with is that
I don't think what you do is wrong. I'm just real quick before you jump.
What I was going to say is that at this point, it's almost more like a guide and it's a loose script. So it's not like I'm writing everything out and anticipating how the conversation is going to go, but I'll throw facts in there and certain questions in there, and I'll actually think because I want to give somebody a good interview. I also view my script as a thinking process of how am I going to analyze this, and so it's also throwing things at something, and then also sometimes I'm just scared, nervously, I had Gamal Hennessy on, who's a comic book lawyer. That is an area that I am not an expert in. By any stretch of the imagination, I'm very nervous. So you're damn right. I'm going to make sure I write something. It's kind of like, I'll give a great example. Wrestling. If John Cena said, hey, I want to come on Just Joshing, you're going to write a script for that. No question about it. Because you just want to make sure that you're on point. You know what I mean? You're going to put a little more effort into it, and you're going to think about it a little bit more.
I think this is different. So I interviewed J.M. DeMatteis. Okay, so when I did that interview, what I actually did, I decided to do something a little different. I wanted to do a different kind of interview with him anyway. So I looked at his other non-Spider-Man work, and I made a point to read as much of it as I could because he doesn't get asked those questions very much. And don't get me wrong, Kraven's Last Hunt is an awesome story, but I also know he's been asked that a million times. Is there any way I could actually make that question interesting anymore? I don't know. But what I can do is I can talk about, the Stardust Kid, because not as many people know about that. Or, maybe I'll talk about, I think it's It's not Moonfleet. Moonhaven. Moonhaven is just one of his more like is a big book he did that not many people know about. So I did that. If John Cena was to come on my show, what I'd be looking at right now is his current Hollywood stuff because I'm not as familiar with that at all.
Oh, I would go a completely different direction. If Cena was to come on my show, we would talk about cars. That's all we would talk about.
Absolutely. That's a good way to go.
He's a big car guy, and I love cars. And so I love like Hot Wheels. I love building Lego cars. I love, super muscle cars. And that's all we would talk about. And I'd say, hey, look, I don't want to talk about anything wrestling. Everybody spoke about that with you. I want to talk about anything that's not wrestling because that's way more interesting. But I would put in a lot of effort. I would go through his car collection, everything that is visible, and I would put in a lot of effort. And I would have a big fact sheet so we could talk about it and say, hey, obviously, what is this like to have this car? But obviously, you have a special edition that has this engine, and we would have a real conversation about it. And it would be such an interesting interview because now we're talking about some real cool stuff that nobody talks about. And the reason why I bring that up and why I say my scripts now and my structure is that while it is a script, it's also just a guide. And it's the idea that I don't read it question for question for question. I used to. And now I've gotten to the stage, but I can't do it in my head, and nor do I want to because, well, I feel comfortable, and as long as I have the technology to do it, and this is what I'm trying to, for people who want to start, and I think it's very important, there is nothing wrong. If you can do it in your head, hey, more power to you, and I love it. But if you're like me, who you need to write something out, bring it up on your screen, use it, and I think, that as long as you're delivering a great show, I personally don't care how you get your show done, as long as it's good.
And honestly, I'm in the same boat. And in fact, like I said, and I'm saying this straight up, I have interviewed people for 20 years. I used to do a lot more copious notes than I do now. I've gotten to a certain point where it's almost a second nature to me. That all said, downside to my approach is I sometimes think I should still do more research than I do. But I'm also confident enough in my abilities. Like, we've had a very interesting conversation. We started at wrestling and we're talking about how to build a podcast, right? So, and what I feel like what I correctly do what you're doing, right? To correctly do what you're doing, you're not so much scripting your show, you're plotting your show, right? You have a plot. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to follow it perfectly because much like when you write a novel, you don't fucking follow that street thing perfectly. The characters say, listen, we're going that way. And you look and I'm like, you look at your map and you look at your scripts, like, this isn't where we were supposed to go. And they're like, shut up.
I have a story.
Uh-oh.
I have a story about that. It's a good one, and he's a friend. So this is where my entire idea failed. This is like the one time it failed, but I failed to success. It was one of my favorite interviews that I've ever done too. So there's this wrestler, Killian McMurphy, and I was trying to get Killian on for like 6 months. He's an indie wrestler. He's really, really cool. And apparently this is what happened is that I wanted to talk about wrestling with him. And he is an LGBTQ wrestler. He's a great guy. And, all I want to do is talk about wrestling with him. And so I'm trying to talk about wrestling, and all he wants to do is talk about Sonic the Hedgehog. So here's what happened is that I get about 7 minutes in. I started asking about wrestling. It's like, let's not talk about that. And so now, instead, I have to improvise. And I want to talk about Sonic the Hedgehog for like 30 minutes. And so now we're just talking about Sonic the Hedgehog. And we're talking about Knuckles. And now we think Knuckles is suicidal in Sonic Adventure 2. And how it's all in his head. And like we had a whole 45-minute discussion on this. And I'm like, this is great. And this is brilliant. And it was one of the most fun interviews I ever had. And it was this idea where it's just that, where I had an entire plot of all of his matches and all of this stuff, and I did so much work, and I was like, you could have just told me we were just going to talk about Sonic the Hedgehog instead, and I would have saved myself 6 hours worth of work.
Oh, absolutely. But sometimes so I had an interview. So my interview style, a lot of it came from one conversation, and that was with a gentleman by the name of Simon Rose. He was hopped up on something. I don't know. I'm not saying he was drinking. He was just really energetic that day. And I was coming in ready to do my usual interview. He was such a character. He was just so unabashedly him. I just realized that about 5 minutes into the interview, why am I even going to bother to ask this guy questions? Fuck it. We're just going to talk. And I liked it so much. I kind of kept it. It's like, I challenged myself. Could I do an interview without asking a question? Right? Because that is a much more challenging interview to do. And that's basically all. If you notice, we haven't really done a lot of questions. Why? Because it's a fun conversation and it's real. That's what I like. So hence the podcast. But I am going to say this, and I'm going to reiterate this, ladies and gentlemen. There's nothing wrong with having a plot for your show. In fact, when you start, it's highly recommended. So,
yeah, I agree. And look, you know what is? I'm the first person to say this, that if you go to my other show, Pop Anime Comics Lounge, and you listen to the first 20 interviews, you are going to have a very negative opinion about me. Because that stuff was rough. It was very question answer, but you know, you could go through that journey of listening to somebody's first bunch of interviews, and even on this show, if you don't want to leave my current show that I'm doing, if you go back to episode 1 when I started doing live, first 5 or 6 were rough too, and there's nothing wrong with that as well. Where it's okay to do straight up question answer, and then slowly get more comfortable, because if you stick with it, you will find your voice and you will get into more of plotting and not pure structure, and then you will find your way out of it. It's very important that, but don't just go blind into things, really, especially in podcasting, because that's how you're going to get in and you're going to get out so quick. It's the fastest way, I feel.
All right, we mentioned the 10 episode thing earlier. So this is why people don't last 10 episodes. It's not just the structural stuff we just talked about. It's also this. You gotta love what you're doing, because you're going to be talking a lot. And if you don't, listen, you can have an obsession about a rock collection and you can make a good podcast out of that. And I'm talking a series. But you better be fucking obsessed about it. Because if you're not, you'll do 2 or 3 episodes and you'll be like, what am I doing? Right?
I'm going to add a slight caveat. Sometimes, there have been 2 or 3 weeks where I'm just like, I don't want to do this. And I'm exhausted. And that happens. Sure. I'm sure you have weeks you're just like, oh man, I don't want to do this. And then I get up and I go and I do it, because, and the theory is that, and Jocko Willink said this, is that, look, it is, he's on a plane and he was writing a book and he could have watched like a Disney movie. He's like, I really want to watch that Disney movie. And it's a really funny interview with him. Because for those who don't know, Jocko Willink was a former Navy SEAL. It's really funny when he says it. But he's like, if I put it down for one day and then the next day I don't want to do it, and the next day, then clearly I don't want to do it at that point, and I have to find a different project to work on. But, he was basically kind of saying that, and that's how I view interviewing, where I have a rough week, I still do the interview, and if I say, I really don't want to do the next one and the next one and the next one, but I don't give myself a week, because I do a lot of content, you do a lot of content. I give myself about 3 weeks. And usually by week 2, I'm like, hey, I want to continue to do this. But if I ever get to the stage, that's not a purposely planned break, which I'm doing, and I'm going to be taking like 2 or 3 weeks off, between, Christmas and the New Year. Oh, yeah. Just to give myself a break. You're probably going to do something similar, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Just because you go crazy if you don't like take 2 weeks off. Say, look, I'm on vacation. Last July, I took 11 days off just because I was like, look, I just want to not talk to anybody for 11 days. My voice is going to be because but the whole point is, and I'll explain why the 11 days thing was important. But it's this idea that if by week 2, I'm really like, I still don't want to do that, and I feel the same way that I felt when I was still doing the interviews in week 1, then I know it's time for me to leave. And so that's the thing that I think people also have to understand, is that there are days that you're not going to want to do any of this. But it's also the idea is that if you feel that way over a period of time, that's also an indication that you have to leave, or that you didn't find the right niche to be in.
And also, there's one other thing too. Once you figure out the formula of your show, you can break your formula once in a while. It's actually good to do that. For example, I've played Magic the Gathering on my podcast. Not for any really good reason, but because I could, right? Because once in a while, it's actually good to break your formula once in a while. Just to give it a little bit of a break and yourself a little bit of a break. Now, you can't do that every episode. Like my next formula break is in 8 days. Ben Cook is interviewing me on my show. I have no idea what he's going to do for my show. I have not a damn clue. But I'm not.
I need to hit him up for that too. I'm going to be probably hitting him up after you.
Yeah. So I told
he's probably gonna kick both of our asses later on when he gets into the podcasting game. So we better make sure.
I don't. Hey, dude, more power to him. He's a great dude. I really enjoyed it. I've had him as a guest on the show already. He's a great dude. I think he'll be fine.
So this is how much I like Ben. Is that Ben gave me a copy of his digital books. I was interviewing him. And then I said, hey, man, I'm back in your project. He's like, why are you back in my project? Like, I said, because I want to support you. Like, I really like the book, and I want to support you. And that was the end of that conversation. So it's like, he was like, pondered why I'm buying your book. And I'm like, oh, well, I want to support you for $15. Like, because I like you and you're good. And this is kind of cool. So funny and I enjoy Ben. I don't know if I'm 100% certain about him interviewing me, and I have to think about it because I'm a little nervous.
You're a control freak. That's the other thing too. You're a control freak, and
I'm.
It's your baby. It's your baby. See, here's the thing. This you don't mind here because this is my baby. If something gets fucked up here, it's on me. It's totally on me. But this is your baby. You worked hard at this, and you're like, okay. Freeze, you got this. Ben is not going to screw it up in one episode. It's not. He really isn't. And know this here. You know this here. Here, though, there's that little bit of...
I would agree under one premise. If I can just do my sponsorship first and then hand it to him, I'll be fine. Just so I can get my sponsorship money in it.
He'll let you do that. I promise you he'll let you do that. I'm going to be doing the same thing, actually, that week. So it's one of those situations. There's... Ben is a businessman. He gets it. He really does. But again, I also know this. Like, you got some other like, oh my God. But see, I also had. So here's the thing. I've had my sister interview me on my show, like way back in the day. She got me to sound like a goldfish in front of an audience. So once that happens, and think about that for just a second. Okay, just think about that for a second. She got me to sound like a goldfish in front of a live audience.
This is where I'm at, is that I just broke formula. Speaking of breaking formula, I just broke formula this week because I guess sort of had an emergency and she's coming on this week. And I was like, hey, I got to do something here. And I'm pissed off, but I want to do something about it. I threw something out, had no idea. I sort of went through 5 people who all said no as an emergency guest. And I said, hey, let me see who's going to jump in. 2 people started, then a fourth person came in, 3rd person, 4th person, and it turned out to be a fun show. And so I don't know how often I can and can't break formula, and that's also the other thing too, is that, I don't know, because it gets tricky because I don't want to do it like every week now,
No, you don't want to do it every week. But here's the question. How many shows do you got in the can at this point?
Oh man, probably like 260.
Okay, so once a month you could. This is where I would tell you. You're at that point. Once a month you could. Right? This is what I've done. I do the drink and draw episodes. I get artists to come in and I just do an episode where I just draw with them. We talk, but it's even chiller than this is. Because it's not quite as conversation focused. It's like, hey, I got pretty picture. Want to see? Right? But it breaks the form. Like I'm doing that every week, every 2 weeks, something like that. and it's fine. You, my friend, right? I feel like with your show, from what I've seen of it, once a month would be beautiful.
I'm thinking about doing a lot of just comic book hangout stuff once a month because I just think it works, and I think that but this is a new concept where I'm throwing stuff at a wall, seeing what works, seeing what I like. Mm-hmm. Also with the comic book hangout stuff, I don't want the same people in every month. I want to mix it up as well, just because I want more interesting stuff going on, and so I want a more interesting mix. And also, that's going to be planned way ahead of time. And I'm debating if it should even be, my regular 4 and then do it on like a Friday. And, maybe everybody pours something that they want to drink and we all have a nice conversation.
Dude, go for it. Here's the other thing, too. You know your formula, right? So if this becomes, let's just say the worst case happens. It's a train wreck. It's a fucking train wreck. Well, now you know, right? And so you won't do it again. But you know what you can do? You can try something else. Again, I played Magic on a podcast. I played a board game on a podcast. I've hopped on one foot and sounded like a goldfish on a podcast. You can do anything you want. That's the cool thing about them.
Me and my 2 best friends this Friday are probably gonna talk about Cowboy Bebop and the Netflix thing that's coming, and so that's gonna be a fun one. And it's going to be a very intimate setting, and it's going to be a good one, and I'm looking forward to it.
Have you been seeing my Bebop drawings?
I have not, and I am guilty of that. So I will take the guilt on it.
No worries. It's all good, man. I post my drawings every so often, and it's kind of like one week I did a cowboy themed drink and draw, so I did a bunch of Cowboy Bebop stuff. Because why the fuck not? So my favorite animes are Full Metal Alchemist. I like both shows. Brotherhood's better, but I do like both shows. And I like Bebop. Bebop's awesome.
Yeah, no. Cowboy Bebop's classic. I am watching FMAB right now. It's great. And so that's going to be fun. And I'm about a third throw. So that's exciting.
So you got now you gotten into past. The only thing that sucks for me about Brotherhood was because since I watched the first show, I could not help but compare the first show with the first 8 episodes because they were almost the same story beats, but they were done differently. But the moment you know who, and I'm not going to spoil this one, guys, because Brotherhood is still technically newish enough, but
so I know what happens because I read the manga.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
So I know all of it, and it's very, very, very exciting. And but I didn't realize how fast Brotherhood was. I didn't realize how fast paced it was. Because I watched about 30 episodes of Brotherhood when it came out, and then sometimes anime just falls through your entire point, and I forgot how fast it was. I legitimately forgot. Saying, "Oh snap! This is what happens in episode 9." Like what? How did this happen? How did this person get killed? And I have a Pop Funko of somebody who got killed, and I love that Pop Funko. And they might be my favorite character, and I'm going to just leave it very ambiguous, so not to ruin anything for anybody. And let's just say that I have a fire in my eye.
I know who you're talking about. We won't go there, but I know who you're talking about.
I thought that was a safe way to put it.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I will introduce one character that I love in this Brotherhood that wasn't in the first one. I love Armstrong's sister. She's a fucking badass.
So, let me explain to you about my guest who canceled last Tuesday, who's coming on this Tuesday. Has an amazing Oliver Armstrong cosplay, and that's the whole reason why we're doing that interview. And I might have just ruined something for everybody, but
no, you didn't. No, you didn't. Go watch the show. One of the biggest. It's literally the biggest difference. If you want to see the argument why Brotherhood is better is just that alone.
Continue.
We can talk about the first show. No, we can talk about the first show. Like the first show.
I didn't see the first show. That's the problem. So we can't talk about it.
Oh crap. Okay. Okay. So I will only mention one thing. This is the only I'm going to mention, and this is why this was hard for me to watch. The pacing in the first show is significantly slower. That death that happens in episode, I want to say 8 or 9, happens in episode 24. So it is a lot slower.
There's also certain things that are left out of Brotherhood that are implied.
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
And
They sped through a lot to get through it, but I am going to say this to people. The first show was paced the way it was in part so they could keep them so Inoue could keep up with doing her manga at her pace. But the other part of it was they did a really good job of character development. And although the second half of the series goes in a completely different direction, it's not even close. It's still interesting. It actually is still very interesting. And I actually have an idea I want to pitch to the studio that does Full Metal Alchemist. I have an idea how to actually cross over both of them.
So my favorite thing that the manga artist does is not Full Metal Alchemist, but I love Silver Spoon.
I haven't seen that one
yet. Silver Spoons is about a guy who wants to go to a agriculture high school / college type thing, and he wants to go there, and he knows very little about it, and it's his entire experience in it, and it has 2 seasons on the manga, and it's a very different, it's not a violent show. Yeah, I want to make that crystal clear here. Full Metal Alchemist has some violence and
absolutely.
some action. But this show it's very heavy in a lot of ways, and you're dealing with certain things and dealing with different components and being accepted by your parents, and also just how agriculture works and how people think that making cheese just happens, and you really get into some really cool stuff that's going on, and it's just a nice show because it's brightly colored and it's fun, but also it's very adult, and I really enjoy what she did with that, and I find it to be such a different pace, but the same quality as Full Metal Alchemist was, and that's kind of hard to explain.
No, she does characters incredibly well. Like that's the one thing about her. She gets characterization superbly well. And the reason, although Full Metal Alchemist definitely is a far more violent show than Silver Spoons is, for sure, the character beats are what make FMA, and that's why it's such a great show. It's not, the action is a cool bonus, and it's neat, and there's some cool concepts in there. And it's a lot smarter than I think people realize. However, it's the characters. It's Ed Now. It's Mustang and Hawkeye. It's Hughes and his kids, and hell, even Wrath and Pride. And that's all I'm going to say. Wrath and Pride. Their relationship.
And it's also about Winnery and her relationship with Ed, and it's also about the role of what a state alchemist is supposed to do and what they are and what they're not, and their roles in certain things, and even also just being a government dog to some degree as well, and dealing with real issues. And I mean,
absolutely.
And I'm not giving away anything, too much for those who haven't seen it. But it's the idea that Full Metal Alchemist deals with a lot of issues, and it also has a tie to Germany in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of stuff that happens with it, and I think people, because it's so interesting. And
I'll show you something here. That's my Edward Elric. What do you think?
You got to move it slightly over. I guess, to my left. There we go. Perfect. I like it.
That's good, huh? So yeah,
I can't draw. Shit.
I've only been drawing for a year, dude. So
I can't draw, but I will show you my happily drawing tools.
nice.
This is a sponsor. No, they're not a sponsor, but I wish they were.
You gotta bring yourself over to the other side now on that one, buddy. But and I'll give you here's a Cowboy Bebop. Guess who Andrew tried to draw here?
Faye, clearly.
Uh-huh. So yeah, Mog Park
I would
actually.
love to have Craig. Yeah,
she's a very special kind of crazy for sure.
She's the type of crazy that's going to be interesting. So talking about Cowboy Bebop, I'm actually curious about you now with that. How do you think the Netflix thing's going to go?
It's a series, so it's got a shot. That's how I feel about it. It's a series. It's got a shot. My only question is, will it bring something new to the dynamic I've already come to know and love? Because if the answer is,
yeah, I'm sorry, I interrupted. I do that way too much.
So the question I have is, okay, so if you're doing a live show and you've got an animated masterpiece, because Bebop is an animated masterpiece, then if you're going to make it live action, what are you bringing to the table that's different from the anime? Because the anime was really good, right? That's why Full Metal Alchemist, like a live action Full Metal Alchemist, was worrisome. Incredibly complex show. And again, the anime did a fantastic job of bringing the human elements together. So Bebop, you damn well better, or it's going to last.
Because it gets complicated when I think with animes, it's easier to bring them into a musical in Japan. I think that jump, because I think everybody gives it some grace, and I think that realm, there's grace there where people understand, well, you need a musical number like Death Note the musical, for instance. I think that makes sense because obviously you're bringing the element of having a musical number in there, and it's a stage play, and you understand certain things can only happen. It's the same thing. I saw the Sailor Moon, stage play where they did the entire first arc of Sailor Moon on stage, and everybody understood that it wasn't perfect, but it brought some element of it to life. And it was very cool. And the cool thing about that is that it was an all-female cast, from my understanding, which is a very cool thing. And this is a group that does this in Japan, and they only did 11 shows or 13 shows in the U.S. Super cool when I was down in D.C. So that to me brings an element to it. But when you then go and take that and say, hey, we're going to throw Hollywood money into this, and we're going to throw Netflix money into this, and you're not telling a new story, but you're just adding it and bringing something that is nearly perfect. I mean, Cowboy Bebop, I don't know how you make it better, but it's the idea that it's nearly perfect, and then how do you make it better? And it's concerning because I don't think the casting is bad. I think this thing has a lot of money behind it, and I think it has a lot of effort, but it could also be just one of those things where no matter what you throw at it, it's not going to work. And I don't trust Netflix after Jupiter Legacy all that much.
Jupiter Legacy is a slightly different animal. We don't have the time to really go into Mark Millar in depth because he is a fascinating. He might be the best businessman in comics. Legit.
Oh, I don't disagree though. My point about that, not to get into too much of the weeds, because I'm sure you and me will have hours of conversation on that.
When I go on your show, we could do that for sure if you want. But
yeah. I'll make sure that I don't book anybody after you. It's gonna be so interesting. But the point I'm trying to make is that I don't disagree with that statement, but I have trust issues with Netflix, and it's part of the business model of Netflix where Netflix has a $20 billion production budget every year. They can afford to spend $1 billion. And they actually can't afford to spend $1 billion, but if they spend $100 million on a show and it doesn't do well, what do they care? because they own it forever. It's in their library, and then they'll move on to their next thing because they only need to be right once, But but let's say that they spend $50 million on Cowboy Bebop, and then that generates 200 million. Again, you only need to be right once. But if you're wrong, it's not that bad because you have shareholders, you get issue more stock, you have subscribers that are paying you $10, $12, $11, or however much a month, and well, you still own the content. It just goes into your library, and you don't have to pay a royalty on it. So obviously, it's tricky.
So creatively, it's about what they can bring. Like, I look at Disney live action movies, and that's always been my thing about them, is what do they bring to the table? I'm going to ask you a kind favor. Do you mind just scooting over to your left slightly? Because you look like you're hiding behind
this way?
Yeah. To your left.
I'm not trying to. So like this or like that?
The other way. The other way.
Oh, so like this?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just super weird because it's like I'm trying to make sure I'm in the camera.
Yeah, no, I get it. Like on my camera, you're like half your face is hidden behind my green screen.
Oh, no. On mine, I'm like fully in, and it's like the weirdest thing.
Yeah,
totally
no, I know.
It looks
here's
so
the thing,
different.
And here's the thing, folks. On the like Uber cameras, I see him fully on the screen. On here, there you go.
So if I'm like this, am I fully?
Oh, yeah, you're fully there.
You're
fully there, yeah.
Because on my end, just so everybody understands why I move my camera that way, I can't see anything. I only see like half this. I see half this right here. That's all I see is like a quarter of this. It's like
on mine, it's just fine. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that question. But
that's why I'm like this. That's the only
reason.
Am I missing something up?
So this might be the greatest audio. This audio is way better than the last one was. So I mean, I know it's gonna be a better audio, but yeah. So to wrap, I just look at this. I creatively look at it. Can you bring something new that hasn't been done before? Is it possible? Yes, I actually think it's possible. Does that mean they're going to do it? I have not seen the Disney remakes of Aladdin and the Lion King live action. And the reason why is why? Why would I do that? There's nothing there that's really that different than what I got in the cartoon years and years ago. I don't, again, business-wise, no fault on anybody's perspective there. But creatively speaking, it's a good show, man. You're going to have to do something either really, really unique.
So for me with Cowboy Bebop, I'm more interested in the Titan Comics side of it. Because my understanding is that those 4 issues are brand new content that are canon. That is bringing something new to it. So that's dropping on December 7th, the first issue, and there's 6 in the first issue. I think Art Gem is doing some covers. There's some photo covers. The blank covers are going to be cool because the opening of Tank is blue, yellow, green, and red, I want to say. And I have a feeling that the 4 issue miniseries blank covers are going to be done in Tank colors because the first one I think is green, the second one is blue. It would make sense if they did yellow and red.
Yeah,
because that's the color Tank, and that to me is the most interesting component of all of this. Is we're getting, what is it? 22 pages. We're getting about 88 pages of new content that's relevant to actually the story. I don't know if it's a prequel. I don't know if it's in between issues. I don't know if it's an epilogue. I'm not too sure, but we're getting new content for Cowboy Bebop,
which is cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, no, that is really, really cool. I will definitely check that out because
I don't think. Yeah. What I was gonna say is that for me as a comic book investor, I think most people are unaware that that's about to drop, and I think people are going to be very unhappy when that thing sells out and they're like come across it in March or May and they're like, this is a graphic novel? I want these issues. What's going on here? And I think that there's real money to be made in that, and I think Titan Comics is going to make a bundle on it.
So my money is so I was very fortunate. I got Last Ronin #1 from my comic shop before anybody else knew it. Right. So I actually got to play it cover price for it, even though it took maybe an extra month from it to me to get there because I had booked it properly. And they were like, so I got my copy of Last Ronin at one. It was like, and I looked at the price for that. It was like, wow, well, there were a lot of angry Turtle fans when that price went through the roof because it hasn't come down really either, right? Because it's a good series and it's just like it's stated its value. This might be just something similar.
I have a feeling that this is what is going to be known as a sleeper.
Yeah.
Sleeper. So Ronin #1, I don't think was a sleeper. A sleeper for those. Maybe it was a sleeper. I don't know. But for those who don't know what a sleeper is a book that it has a low print run sometimes or a large print run. Everybody counts it out. Nobody buys it, and then a month later, a year later, or 3 years later, depending on what happens, that book skyrockets, and then it reaches a floor that is at least 100 times what its value was. And that's kind of where it is, and that is the floor of the book. That's not the ceiling. That means that book stays within that range. And so sleepers are always good because, if you pick up them, and that's what happens. Ultimate Fallout 4 is a sleeper, meaning that my story about that book is I have a first print edition of that book because Midtown Comics was giving it away for free on Free Comic Book Day in 2013 or 2014 in their packs for free. That book is a $400 plus book at this point. So you're talking about a book that is only going to go up in value, that a comic shop on Free Comic Book Day, to be nice, was giving it away for free because they had an over order of it and they didn't know what to do with it. And that day, they probably gave away over $100,000 worth of comics in that one book to all the people. And I think Midtown serviced like 500 or 600 people. Easy over $100,000 of that book. Easy.
No, like I've been pretty. I've hit some accidental hits sometimes, but I don't look. Again, I'm a collector in the sense of I just like go out buying shit I like to read, and when you do that, every once in a while you hit a hit, and every once in a while you most of the time though you just got a good book. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Hey! I've built a lot of wealth. And I'll briefly explain, and I can't financially advise anybody, nor am I. I buy comics to sell. So I like to buy a book for $20. I like to sell for 50 or 60. I then pay myself back. eBay takes 13%. I'm usually left with about $18 after that entire deal. I then buy another book for that $20, and then I take that $18 and put it into the stock market, into a dividend producing stock. And that is how I built wealth. And I bought a lot of stock that way. And I generate enough income that my dividends every month are significant. And they just get reinvested and reinvested and reinvested. And I pick good companies. And I'm very boring in that realm. But, it's allowed me to add a lot of wealth in a very, very easy way. And I'm not doing anything fancy. Anybody can copy me, but I'm not going to tell you what books to buy. I'm not going to tell you how much money you need to start. I'm not going to tell you what stocks to buy because I don't want to financially advise anybody, but that is the strategy I use. And it's proven to be very effective. But I also have anywhere from $35,000 to $70,000 worth of movable inventory that is sort of needing to be moved out. And sometimes I move out a lot of inventory and sometimes I don't. So obviously I'm very much invested in this game.
Absolutely. My friend, I think all in all, I think this one was a better interview. I think I got you laughing a lot more for sure this time around.
It could have just been the day, I could have been stressed out,
Oh, no,
we didn't get into my entire Kickstarter learning process. So that's a whole bag of worms. January is what's going on with it, everybody. That's when we're launching. Wanted to launch in November. It did not go that way. But instead of killing myself, the quick story of that is if I launch in January, I have a hell of a lot more time to take my time and make sure it's perfect and do connections and also make this process less stressful.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Maybe the next time you come on the show. I'm assuming you want to come back because you did kind of do a repeat episode. So,
well, I'm never coming back. No.
I'll never come back.
Need somebody, anytime you need somebody not on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, I'll happily be on your show anytime. And you're coming on my show sometime in December. I just have to get through Thanksgiving first.
No, fair enough. Then I'll definitely be there. So we mentioned Redbubble already, so we won't do that again. How can people find you, good sir?
You can come bother me on my Facebook page, Pop Anime Comics. You can join my comic book group, Indie Comic Connect. It's free to join that group. Just state what your book is. State, if you got a podcast, you need to have a comic book, a podcast, or you just need to say, hey, I don't have either, but I like indie comics, and we'll happily have you on. And part of that group, just don't post porn or eBay links, and you're fine to go. You can try to friend me on Facebook. I may or may not accept you on that. It depends who you are. It also depends on who you tell me who you are. If you'd like to be on my show, you can shoot me a message on Pop Anime Comics. You could bother me on my personal Facebook page. You could shoot me a Twitter DM, which is at Pop Anime Comics. If you'd like to buy my t-shirt, you can be the first t-shirt buyer. And I would greatly appreciate my t-shirt being bought. But don't feel obligated. It's totally fine. Not everybody's a Gundam fan. And if you're not a Gundam fan, you're just wrong. So on that note, that's what's up with that. And, if you think that I'm wrong for telling you you're wrong, go watch Gundam and then realize that you have been corrected. So I'm just going to say that. And then after you watch the original Gundam, go watch Cowboy Bebop and then watch the Netflix thing after you watch the masterpiece of the anime. This way you could be disappointed. And then the final thing is obviously my website is popanimecomics.com, where I do articles about anime, comics, and pop culture. And then finally, you could bother me on Instagram as well, where I just post my cool stuff up of my comics and Pop Funkos. And I'm not looking to sell you anything there. I legitimately just want to share my collection. And you could tell me what your favorite stuff is, and we can interact on that front, because that is my personal stuff that I like to share with everybody in the comic community. And I like to have conversations on Instagram about what cool comics, Pop Funkos, and collectibles we have. So anything like that. And I'm just going to say, if I owe you money, I am going to quietly walk away as if I broke something in a store, and good luck trying to track me down.
Alrighty. So you can find him there. And if you're a debt collector, I don't know this man. That's it. I'm just going to say that's straight. I just don't know this man. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This was a very special edition of Just Joshing. Andrew, I want to thank you for coming back on again and doing this. This was great. This was a lot of fun. For those that want to support me, my Twitch channel is twitch.tv/JustJoshingPodcast. My YouTube channel is Joshua Pantellaresco. Hit the like, subscribe, enable notifications. I just put the link at the bottom here. Alice 1 is available now for pre-order. You can definitely check that out. I'll be back tomorrow night after I come back from Calgary, and my guest will be Philip Brissert. It'll be a lot of fun. But until then, guys, stay inspired, keep shining in the dark, and I'll see you guys next time.